Hello, welcome to episode 7 of The Middlemen. I'm Tom Lemongello, and I am joined by Todd Sawicki and Mira Hayashi. And this is The Middlemen, as I mentioned. And The Middlemen is a place where we have discussions where we talk about the intersection of media and e-commerce, and we really try to explain issues that we see in the news and from our work with clients. And really, to talk about that, we've never actually introduced the company that brings you the Middlemen, and that is Nextopedia, a company that all three of us work for. And so, Todd, can you give us a little intro and ad for Nextopedia?
So Nextopedia helps companies at the intersection of online retail and media. And our experience as business people is around helping companies manage technology. We've developed technology, we've sold SaaS, we've developed SaaS technologies. And so today, as a group, we have technologists, we have business people, we have marketers. It's really helping companies manage that. And sometimes it's helping e-commerce projects, helping companies with e-commerce projects, and other times it's with media and ad tech projects, and more with the intersection of both of those worlds at retail media, which we just spent a few episodes talking about. That's where a lot of focus is in both industries and our day-to-day lives in terms of helping companies. And so I think that lends us to something we wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more, which is more on the e-commerce side
Yeah.
for a couple of episodes.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions that comes up all the time, I think, when we talk to brands and merchants is you have to be on Shopify. And so I think we wanted to talk a little bit about, like, why does that question come up and where does Shopify sort of sit in the world of e-commerce? I was sort of an outsider to this. You were more in the Shopify world. And I was sort of coming at it where it's like, what does this really look like? I've heard that there's sort of, it's sort of easy to get onto, but that's sort of all I knew at the beginning. And so over time, I started to understand it better. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Todd.
And for some more background, Tom, myself, and Mira came from a company called Fantastic, which was a company that uh, acquired and built SaaS applications for the Shopify platform. Shopify as a platform is a platform that you can build a storefront. It's sort of Salesforce.com is to CRM, as Shopify is to storefronts and online storefronts. And what that means is it's a platform that allows you to build an online store. It is a platform that supports millions of merchants. I think, Tom, you read it's 2 million merchants or storefronts are active on Shopify nowadays.
Yeah, that was as of April, that's what they say they have.
And so it's obviously a very popular platform for building storefronts. And one of the things about Shopify is as a platform is kind of two things. It works in different. Each storefront is a unique instance, much like Salesforce.com, where if you have two separate businesses, customer records on one don't mingle with customer records on another. They're completely separate. And in the Shopify platform, your storefront is completely separate and independent from other storefronts. There's no, I go to a Shopify homepage and I see every product listed on Shopify. It's not a marketplace like Amazon. It's an e-commerce platform. And it's sort of and there are other e-commerce platforms out there in terms of building storefronts. In the truly probably the easiest layer of that are e-commerce offerings from website builders like Squarespace or Woo. WooCommerce is an offering, yeah, Woo, and that is a very point and click, no code, a very basic storefront with very limited customization. They have kind of defined themes and look and feel and workflows, and it's really meant for smaller shops. And then Shopify is kind of above that, where it still can be relatively simple, but has a lot of extensibility, a lot more, and it has an app store. And so there's lots of plugins you can build and really kind of build a diverse Shopify store. And then scaling up from there, you would get into more enterprise offerings where you really can customize to a much bigger degree, where the next layer above that is a e-commerce platform called BigCommerce, and then above that you might have older, more mature platforms like Magento, which are truly like you're hiring a team of developers and it's almost like building a storefront from scratch. It's a very enterprise grade, ERP friendly type of offering. And so Shopify kind of sits in the middle between the low end of functionality in terms of WooCommerce and Squarespace, and the high end, higher, more customizable enterprise end of BigCommerce and Magento. Now, it's not to say they're not big stores on Shopify. And I think this might be a good handoff to you, Mira. So background for folks, Mira worked, as I said, with Tom and I at Fantastic. She worked on the customer success side and operations side. And so she has a lot of experience in terms of working with storefronts, and at Nextopedia, she helps manage and work with stores in terms of setting up technologies, in terms of setting up, working with apps and helping them set up customer success and other operational processes. And so Mira, what's your experience in terms of working with Shopify, and what's your perspective on the types of stores that you've seen use Shopify and use it successfully?
Well, so I've worked with Shopify both from the direct to customer side, running an actual store, and from the B2B side, supporting SaaS apps, basically. So I've seen it from both the customer's perspective. I've seen it from the brand's perspective. And I've also worked at Fantastic. We had a little mini marketplace. And we had hundreds of brands or stores, and they participated. So I got to see all of their back ends, work with them on their processes, see how they run their own Shopify stores. I'm also kind of a tech nerd, so I love setting up tools or products, things like that. So I've gotten really used to configuring stores and setting up sort of workflows and processes that make sense for that store and the customer's journey. So having said that, who are the stores on Shopify? They are tiny, new people who are running their little jewelry store, or maybe they have like a little fashion brand, and then they're big guys, huge, like Allbirds, Steve Madden, $1 million companies can be on Shopify. So that's one of the most exciting things, is that Shopify scales with you. So you could be that mom and pop, and then you can grow to be the monster store that owns everything. I think one of the most appealing things about Shopify is that it's so configurable and that it is separate. So it's not like Etsy or Amazon, where you have to share and you kind of have to set up your little storefront in their store. In Shopify, it's your own kingdom. You can customize it, do whatever you want, and you can keep control of your own customers, which is huge. You have the first party data. You decide how to communicate with your customers, and when and how and where and why. So that's a big deal. It's also I want to like emphasize scalability is really important. If you build on something that's too big for you at the beginning or too small for you in the end, you're going to be stuck. And so it really makes sense to build on something that's going to grow with you, that's going to keep changing and evolving as your store does. Having said that, Shopify is, because it's so configurable and customizable, it can be really overwhelming. Similar to Salesforce, or people out there who know Zendesk, it's got so many options that you can feel like, oh, I don't even want to do this. Like you start to set it up and you're like, oh, it's too hard.
But is there great support on Shopify?
No. I mean,
By the way, that's important to emphasize. Like Shopify is this great platform, really extensible, and I want to double down on what Mira's, like great support from Shopify. I think the answer is maybe, where do you find great support to help you with Shopify? Might be the great answer, and obviously your answer, it's not Shopify.
Right. Shopify, like all big companies, you can't get somebody at Salesforce to just set up your Salesforce for you. You got to do it yourself. Shopify gives you information, FAQs, but they're not going to do it for you. They're not going to help you too much because they're all about their own scalability. So that makes it frustrating for people who are new to Shopify, who don't understand the landscape. So I would say, pretty much without exception, if you're really serious about building a Shopify store, you've got to hire an expert to get you set up and in a position that makes sense for you and is comfortable for you. And then you can keep growing from there. And that setup cost could be, 10,000, which is worth it because you have somebody. Shopify experts understand what questions to ask, what problems will arise, what you're going to need. An example I like to use is I've run into a lot of smaller shops like a jewelry store that have customization options, but they didn't think to put in a notes field before purchase is finalized, and they didn't make that notes field required. So like those are the kinds of steps that a Shopify expert can think through and make sure is happening in your store that it may not have even occurred to you. You're like, well, the necklace is for sale. There we go. And then they can advise you about processes. Like some of these stores I worked with they were like, well, they'll just email us after the fact and tell me what to put in the customization. And, that's not a efficient process and it doesn't scale over time. So that's what I think. It's important to invest in that expert up front. It's not a perfect plug and play sort of a tool.
So, I mean, what is it that Shopify App Store, like ecosystem, what are they good at? Like, what are the types of things that you go to the App Store for?
Well, before we go to the App Store for a second,
yeah.
I think I want to make a clarification comment, Tom, which is that when Mira talks about, working with Shopify experts, there are dev shops, Shopify specialized dev shops that build out Shopify stores for people. They work with creative agencies who might design the look and feel of a store, or marketing agencies who help promote a store, maybe do customer acquisition. But you really need a Shopify specific dev shop. Again, like we've talked a little bit about Salesforce, there are Salesforce specific dev shops that help you customize your CRM systems. And in this case, there are Shopify specific development shops. Like at Nextopedia, we have a Shopify specific dev team, for instance. And it's a dev team who has an incredible amount of experience working, both developing Shopify apps as well as developing Shopify storefronts. And it's kind of, interestingly enough, we have a lot of projects where we're fixing stores that were set up by non-Shopify experts and non-Shopify dev shops. So I wanted to point that out in terms of there's a specific, if you're going to build out a Shopify store, you need to look for people who have extensive experience developing on and with Shopify, which also means working with Shopify apps and configuring them and helping set them up within the confines of a store. And so I think that's to get back to your question, Tom, in terms of, yes, there's a base storefront and there's a base platform that Shopify offers. And it's really about a product catalog and logistics and order fulfillment and a cart and payment. And beyond that, you end up turning to, they have this catalog of apps, plugins, you might call it in the WordPress world, plugins, and apps in the Shopify world. And so, Mira, to get back to that question, what does that look like, and what are the types of apps that help extend a store and go beyond what sort of the base Shopify functionality offers?
So Shopify is always evolving, but yes, it has your basic start to finish of the store experience. But the apps tend to bulk up the customer acquisition side of things, marketing and getting the word out, and then getting people to come back again, repeat purchases. Then you have your upsells, cross sales. There are a ton of apps that do that, and that's getting the most out of the order as possible, getting the customer to buy what they want and as much of what they want as possible. And then you have the post-purchase experience, which also includes upsales, but the customer communication portal, which a lot of people forget, Shopify doesn't necessarily cover. It's something that you're going to have to plug in from some other tool or app. The cool thing, though, is that Shopify integrates with nearly everything. It's not one of those things where you're like, there are only 3 apps and, my favorite tool isn't going to work with Shopify. Like if you use Shopify, whatever else you're using is going to work with Shopify. It's very rare for it not to. Yeah. So then I think another reason that you want to be interested in an expert is because they understand what's missing in Shopify or what's not as robust as it could be. And one of the biggest things I think to point out is the beginning of the process, that customer acquisition feature. Shopify will work with a customer acquisition app like Klaviyo or Omnisend, but it doesn't provide it for you, and it doesn't configure it, and it doesn't configure the connections for you. And then on the opposite end, the customer communication is the same. Like you're going to need somebody who's going to set that up for you so it works. And you don't need them around the clock to like watch it and update it for you. And I just wanted to go back to that idea of experts and customization. We've run into a few stores who decided we're big already. We're going to just set up our own custom site. And when they did that, they ended up spending a ton of money for a site that was buggy because you had to reinvent the wheel. Every single step of the store had to be created by a dev team from scratch. And then they're married to that dev team forever. They can't ever make upgrades or changes without going back to that team. But Shopify will be making those upgrades and changes itself over time. So if you're using an app, that app is always going to be integrated properly with your Shopify. I mean, unless it's discontinued. So you don't have to like shell out for that. And these custom app or custom site people also end up spending money on payment processors, inventory management, things that you're going to end up having to plug in anyway, but Shopify does do, or it has an app that'll do it more to your liking. So those are more reasons.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I come from is like, the reason that Shopify seems to be such an amazing platform is really like Shop Pay, like the idea that it's like the most seamless, fastest, easiest way to sort of get your payment details in there and keep them there. And that's something that is much more sort of cross merchant. It seems like that sort of plugs in everywhere, but that's kind of the exception rather than the rule.
Shop Pay is the exception to your point, Tom, about, so I mentioned earlier that your stores are, it's a confederation of stores. And the confederation meaning they're independent, right? They're their own little fiefdoms, their own little kingdoms. You own your customer records. Shopify doesn't. You can market to them. You are first party to that customer relationship. Shopify is what's called second party, meaning they're the vendor that supports you. They don't own the customer record. They provide the technology that allows you to own the customer record. And ShopPay is the one technology that does work. Once you set up a ShopPay profile, which is a profile with Shopify for ShopPay, it will, and you go to a second store on Shopify, and you put in your phone number, it will recognize that and then prompt your payment through that. Right. Everything else, your catalog is entirely different. The profile purchases are different. The inventory is different. The logistics are different. All of that is separate and apart, which is an interesting, just to make a discussion like we were talking about retail media. Retail media hasn't really taken off across Shopify because there is no cross merchant retail media play yet on Shopify.
Yeah.
And will it come? I think that's a discussion for a future date, but I think it speaks to the independence of all the stores on Shopify. And so that is, I think, something that is important. What's also interesting is that these app providers could connect multiple stores because they're independent of Shopify. And they could have terms of service that say, oh, storefront A, let's say I'm a product recommendation company. There's popular ones out there, Rebuy, LimeSpot, et cetera. And they work across, they currently don't do recommendations across stores, but they could do it.
Right.
And they could say, I offer, hey, I'm going to recommend, a different stores, maybe a partner store or something else, and through how they deliver their services. So the apps have a way of potentially connecting storefronts. They haven't yet, but I think that's a discussion in terms of the future of Shopify.
Yeah, so fans of Ben Thompson and aggregation theory, it seems like you're saying that the apps are sort of that area where that aggregation could happen, but yet it seems to not always play out.
It hasn't happened yet, right? Because the stores are independent and the app providers haven't quite figured out how to connect those storefronts.
Right.
But I think that's it. It is. So the biggest lesson and focus about Shopify is you're building your store and you're building your kingdom, and it's going to be an independent kingdom.
Right.
And that's probably the right way to think about it. Even if the underlying technology is shared behind the scenes across storefronts, you are on your own.
Well, yeah. And you are, that is a benefit that, say, an Amazon doesn't give them, getting the first party data, being your sort of own shop to see your own conversions.
Right. On Amazon, you don't even get to see the customer records.
Yeah.
You don't know who the customer is. You can't market to them. You have no communication. All you are is just sort of, you're more wholesale than anything to Amazon, because Amazon's the merchant of record, not yourself. And even if you have a brand relationship and you own a brand and you own a product and it's yours and you're not a reseller, they're not your customers, they're Amazon's. And so that's where, going back to the beginning, why are you being told to get on Shopify? So you can own those customer records and you can market to them and build a true first party customer relationship with that customer. Going back to, the Shopify and thinking about that, and sort of I think one of the lessons here is that Shopify is a great platform, but you need to be thoughtful about how you build out your Shopify presence. And, Mira, I think that's kind of what you're getting at. And I think one of the other things to think about that we've all talked about, and some of the stores that we've worked with and really stubbed their toes, is when they were setting up their stores, they didn't necessarily think through one of the most important things you do when you first set up your store is select a theme. And, what does that mean by a theme? And is it like just a look and feel like a WordPress theme, or is it more functional? And what are the pitfalls, and things to look for when setting up your store and your themes? Because I think it's really something that is worth a quick discussion.
Yeah, so in Shopify, the themes are basically in their own version of an app store. You can go into a theme store. There are different developers. There are some that are developed by Shopify, some that aren't, some that cost money, some that are free. But it is not just about design in Shopify. It's about function. So you have to really decide on the theme based on the functionality possible. And then if you're working with a dev team or an expert, it would sort of depend on what's customizable within that theme if you're taking it up that level. There's also there's a theme called Dawn in Shopify, and it is basically a collection of rules and code that is more flexible. And so it looks like that's the future of Shopify themes. You're really going to need to use a theme that uses Dawn as its base in order to grow. Over time, if you're paying for a non-Dawn based theme, you may find that you have to move to a new theme eventually. So it's
Is the right
not true
analogy
today,
for a
but
theme
future.
like it's a foundation to your store and your Shopify implementation?
Yes, it's the foundation of the story, and it's really important. You can always change themes, but it's a pain to do that. So if you could get closest to what you need and want from the beginning, you're going to be happier in the long run.
You brought up a good point, and I think it's in our discussion around Shopify internally, Tom, you had a great analogy about Shopify, because I think one of the things that unlike other platforms like WordPress, where there's free themes and free plugins, everyone should be aware Shopify is a paid platform. You're paying for a storefront, the apps are paid for, and I think it's sort of, don't just assume when you see the marketing around it's $29. It's not.
Yeah,
So,
that's sort of where
Tom, what's the analogy you like to use for
I look
Shopify?
at it. I mean, what it's sort of coming to me is like, as I see this app ecosystem and listen to the merchants, talk about how they're getting, which ones they're selecting. It seems to me very much like the budget airlines. And so it's, is it like a Spirit Airlines experience where, you can get into Shopify for $29. But once you figure out, how to sit with your family and, get some food, where you're back up to Delta prices. So, I think that there's something to be said there that, Shopify markets really hard to get people who are early in their understanding of how to run a brand on the platform. But the prices can rack up.
Yeah, I think that's an important one. Mira, what's your perspective on what people are paying for their Shopify store, for these third-party services, these apps, for these themes? Are they paying, just 29 or 59 or $69 a month, or are they paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month, typically for, kind of a mid-range store?
Mid-range, I would say a couple hundred a month. It's not terrible. Um, but it can get up, like if you're using a really powerful recommendation app or cross-sell upsell app, it's going to cost you it costs you a percentage of your sales that are connected to that app generally. So if you're doing really well, the charges will be a little bit higher, but you'll still be making more money because of the behavior of the app. So it's one of those you make money to spend or you spend money to make money situations.
Yeah. What is it like? Because I think Shopify is actually getting rid of the Shopify Plus moniker, which is sort of the base for getting into your sort of more enterprise type of clients. And so I don't know, I forgot where that was. It was like 100, 150 or something like that. But I think that idea still holds, that there's a higher tier.
Yeah, it comes with multiple storefronts is one thing that it comes with right now. And again, it's changing, but nobody's quite sure what's happening, where it's going, what the details will be. But
That's
for
because
me,
Shopify hasn't announced them, to be clear. Shopify has been
yeah,
talking about some of these changes,
Yeah.
but they haven't announced what exactly it's going to be.
Right.
right. One of my favorite features, because I'm a workflow person, is Shopify Flow, and that comes with the Plus package, and that lets you automate a lot of things. Like you can automatically cancel an order if it throws up a fraudulent flag saying this is maybe a fraudulent order. You could just
Wait, so
auto
you're saying
cancel it.
if here's a great example of the details of the storefront, which is you might assume if a transaction's flagged as potentially fraudulent, it would cancel it automatically. And that's not a standard setup or feature. And I think this little detail is really kind of an example of, oh, it helps to work with people who know what they're doing when setting up your storefront or running it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah,
Well, I think
that's very
that's
true.
probably where we should cut it for today. I think we have either one or two more of these in the series of Shopify discussions in the hopper. So I'm excited to keep going with it. But I wanted to thank Mira for joining us today, and as always, Todd. Great episode, and I actually learned some things on it. So I was happy.
So yes, for everyone, as Tom said, we are going to follow up. We want to dive more into the specifics of like which types of apps and names of ones if you're setting up a store. And also, we also work with companies who are SaaS companies trying to get into the Shopify app ecosystem. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And sort of a next level of detail. So I think that'll end up being two more, Tom. And so if you want to be made aware of when those come, subscribe, like, and you'll get notified at your favorite podcasting platform. And we know it's come up. Apple people, we're working on it, registering with Apple. We're going through some bureaucracy with Apple's setting up a business account with them right now, but we're on it, and it'll be coming shortly.
We're close. It's coming soon.
Yes.
So yes, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.